Battalion Chief Bailey Martin. I'm here today with Raymond and Hallie Neville. We are continuing our program basically where we get to know some of our members, hear a little bit about their stories, hear about how they came into the fire department, and also just how the fire department has affected their lives. So thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it. You guys are not unique in the sense that we do have several couples in our department that are married and both firefighters, but it certainly is unique compared to the rest of society, having two firefighters in the same house, and you two also both being officers, I think is pretty interesting. So just want to talk with you guys a little bit today about, how you got in the fire department, what led you to the fire department, and kind of how life has been since then. So, Ray, why don't you start? Ladies first. Okay, we'll go ladies first.
No, that's fine. I can start.
So, just tell me a little bit about life before the fire department. Where'd you grow up? What kind of things were you into?
I grew up in the metropolis of Fairfax County, which was a nightmare for traffic, and I moved out of there when I was 18 years old. Went to college for a year. College didn't really work out for me. I wasn't interested in the curriculum or becoming a physical education teacher. No offense to phys ed teachers, I just wasn't cut out for it. Mm-hmm. And I came back home, and my sister actually was a sergeant in the Loudoun County Sterling Volunteer Fire Department, and she was like, "Hey, quit mulling around the house. You should come volunteer with us." And I was like, "All right, whatever." So my 18-year-old self went up to the firehouse and met some of the guys, and they were actually ex-football players from Virginia Tech. That was the crew that I ended up working with, and they were like, "Oh yeah, it's just like football. You run into someone's house and break stuff."
And you played football too?
I did. I played in a D3 school in Delaware for a year, and all throughout high school and my youth. But that's how it started. The itch started in Loudoun County. I moved out west for 5 years, and I got a job as a fire marshal after working for a year in a fire department. But in that time, my family moved down to Richmond, and my sister, again, had moved down here, and she was like, "You should apply there." And I made it 17th on the list of 500 or something and got hired in the second class. Mm-hmm. I have to audit that somehow. But, but it was great because I got to meet my wife in the academy.
Yes.
In 2003-1, best class ever.
Did you have, I know you mentioned you were a fire marshal. What part of out west?
I was in Summit County, Colorado, which is about an hour west of Denver up I-70. So it has been taken over. It was Keystone Fire Department, but it's now Lake Dillon Fire and Rescue. So it's a bigger group of people. But it was a residency program. Mm-hmm. The reason I did it was kind of like what they do up in PG County, Maryland, where you live in the firehouse and they pay for your schooling and your housing in exchange for shift work.
Did you have any jobs before you got that?
I did.
You said you were out there for like 5 years.
Yeah, right? No. Well, I worked for them for 4 of the 5 years. I was the resident for a year while I was living there. Before that, I waited tables. That was the coolest trade craft in the world because you can move to any city, any town, and wait tables within 2 days. And you name any big chain, I was a part of it at some point.
But you kind of knew once you did that volunteer thing that's fire service was what you really wanted to do.
So I'm volunteering up in Loudoun County. It's hilarious. My sergeant at the time, he didn't talk to me ever that first year. And we're sitting on the apron, and I was like, "Man, there's got to be like a trade school you can go to. Like, come on, man, isn't there something?" He took Firehouse magazine and threw it at me, and he told me to go to the back and shut your mouth. I don't ever want to hear from you again. And I opened up the back, and there was this, residency program, Keystone, Colorado. And I literally took that article, wrote a letter, made a phone call, flew out there. And, of course, it's 8,000 feet. So I had to, really be in shape to go up there and take – it was basically a CPAT. Mm-hmm. And I did not know that altitude sickness was a thing before I moved up there, and went and took the test. I passed, obviously. But it was a unique experience. There's a lot of wildland interface up there, so you get to see that ICS 300 well before it was ICS, or not 300, but ICS.
Yeah, I have my mom's family's from Colorado, so I've been out there several times. My cousin went to Air Force Academy, so I've spent a lot of time in Colorado Springs, Denver, Greeley, Colorado, Boulder, or Fort Collins, a little bit. So it's beautiful out there.
Range.
It always kind of struck me too how I've driven out there a few times, and it's like you're driving through Kansas and eastern Colorado, and it's like I can see the mountains. Like
And
we
all of a
must be
sudden
getting
just-
close,
yep.
and it's like 4 or 5 hours away
Yes, it is.
still.
It's daunting.
And it's just like
Yes.
flat and then huge mountains where
Yes.
we kind of ease into it out here. So
Yeah, it's
it's
incredible.
it's a great place. Great
Yeah.
place.
And he had an uncle in Colorado too.
Yeah.
That was nice.
He's down in Denver.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that he didn't move completely blind
Yeah.
when
Oh,
he
that's
went out
good.
there.
That's good.
But yeah, he was in Denver and you were in the mountains. So
Did you
it was
ski much?
different.
Actually, that was one of my first jobs. So when I wasn't waiting tables, because everybody has 5 jobs when they're a kid, I worked for guest services on the mountain, which was such a stick. Because I was an EMT basic, they helped the ski patrol, but they also greeted people in the morning at the base of the mountain. Welcome to Keystone. My name is Ray. Have you ever been here before? No. Why don't you and your family come with me and we'll get on the 4-pack or the gondola and I'll take you up a couple slopes. I'll show you how it is. I mean, it was a joke. I got a free ski pass and a cool uniform, and I tell people to slow down when I was like, sitting there gossiping on the trails. But
When you're like 19. giving
yes,
people orders.
exactly. 18, 19 years old, and just freshies every morning with the ski patrol. So it was fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I was a security guard at one point out there. Like, I did it all. It was fun.
So Hallie,
Yes.
let's talk about your path to the fire service. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about yourself pre-fire. Where did you grow up? All those kinds of things.
Okay. I grew up in not a metropolis. It was actually the town of Ashland, which is bigger now.
Center of the universe.
It is the center of the universe. Don't you forget it. And I still know the song. But no, I grew up out in Ashland, and I actually did not have aspirations to be a firefighter for my childhood growing up. It was one of those things you saw, but like Ashland was a very small town, so you didn't see a lot of women volunteering per se, and we had a big volunteer squad in Ashland.
We got a lot of people that came
Yes,
from
from
got
Hanover.
learned the fire service in that
Absolutely.
house.
Yep.
Mhm.
Absolutely. It's right in the center of town. And then there's some, like there's one in Montpelier, there's one in Ashland. Long story short, I love sports, and so I actually went to VCU and got my degree in athletic training. So I was doing sports medicine work when I started actually working with a firefighter, or I was working on a firefighter at the PT clinic that I was working at. So I worked part-time at a high school providing their athletic training services, or I was contracted out through my physical therapy clinic, and then I worked in the physical therapy clinic during the mornings and in the summer. And worked on a firefighter, and he was just like, you do a lot of stuff that seems like you'd have the personality. Have you ever thought about it? And he was a long-term patient. We saw him for like probably 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just this slow buildup of like,
Was
have
he
you
from
seen
here?
Yeah, he was from Richmond. And he was like, have you seen our schedule? Have you seen this? And he was like, you snowboard and you work at Peak Experience? Like he was like, that's all of these things. I just really, and so I was like, I saw a volunteer, like I thought of, but that's not really. And he's like, no, you just need to come to my firehouse and just come to the firehouse. And he worked for Rescue 1. It was Robert Patrick, and he worked for Rescue 1 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came to the firehouse and I looked around and I sat in the back of the truck and I was like, this is what I will do for the rest of my life. How do I get a job? Like, I'm
cool.
sold. I am done. I
awesome.
loved the smell. I loved everything about it. I loved sitting up that high. Like I loved it. I tell anybody, and COVID has been so hard with it, but I tell anybody, if you are thinking about the fire service, and if you want to be a firefighter, but you're not sure how or where, go do a ride along, and that will solidify in you if they're,
If you want
where you want to be, what county or department you want to be, inner city. It'll help with that. But just walking into the firehouse, and it's funny because I will tell that story and other firefighters will say the same thing. And like Kelly Stillwell remembers the smell of like her dad's station. She was like, it was just like the smell and the ambiance in the
Everything.
station. And she was like, that's what you want to do. It's like it's just a feeling. But anyway, long story short, so I was a little bit longer path to my becoming a firefighter. So decided to do that. Actually decided because it's a long process. So went ahead and got my EMT. So started doing some ride-alongs through that. I did it through Henrico County, which is actually where I met Tracy, and then our paths kind of, because she was a firefighter here as well.
You mean
That's
Tracy Schrage?
Tracy Schrage, yeah. That's
Mhm.
where our paths intertwined. And then applied for Richmond and applied for Henrico County, actually. Well, I applied for Richmond the first time, just for Richmond. Didn't make it through that application process. Applied a second time. Got obviously through that one, and that's when I applied to Henrico and Richmond. And luckily, Henrico hired me, and Richmond waitlisted me, but I kept calling them, and I was just like, "You promise? You promise you're going to have another academy, and I'll be in it." Yes, we promise you will be in the next academy. There will be at least 2 academies on this list. You will have a job.
What was driving that for you? Because at that point, you really didn't know that much about the fire service. So what, because a lot of people would certainly, most people take the first job they can get, regardless. They'll
Right.
apply to everywhere in the area.
Right.
Because it is a numbers game. There's
no.
always a lot
For
of
the record,
applicants.
I have 5 years of rejection letters from every department you can think of.
Right.
DC, Loudoun, Fairfax, Henrico, Chesterfield, and a
Right.
ton out west. So
Right. Yeah.
And I was lucky. I applied one place.
I got
One
some
time.
all the
One
way-
time, one
Got it.
place.
Oh.
I kind of given up. I was like the last class on my list. So it was like almost 3 years
Oh,
by
really?
the
I
time
didn't
they
know
called
that.
me
Oh, wow.
waited?
from when I first applied.
Right,
Because
right.
you have that first 6-month period of physical agilities and interviews and all that, and then
Right.
it was like right around Christmas time.
Merry Christmas.
I got a letter out of the blue, and hey, when do you want to come in
Yeah.
for an interview? And I was like, I was at a point in my life where it made sense, and
Yeah.
so why just Richmond? What drew you to Richmond over? Was it just because you had that connection with that person, or did you have more information
Yeah.
by then?
Well, I think for me, so there was a couple of things, and this is no disrespect to Henrico County, but it's why I tell people to do ride-alongs. So through the EMT program, I did a couple of ride-alongs in Henrico, and then I had done one in Richmond, and there are personalities to fire departments.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt like my personality matched with Richmond more than it did when I did the ride-alongs in Henrico. And I also had moved to the city at that point. So when I started at VCU, I lived at home for the first year, and then from there on, I lived in Richmond. And so at this point, I had been living in the heart of the city in the Fan for 7 years or so. And so for me, if I had the choice between Henrico or anywhere, Richmond was always going to be where I wanted to work, because I knew there was a fire station 4 blocks from my house. I knew there was, a station over on Hermitage, and it was home. Right. I was like, I want to work where I'm going to know. And I ended up getting to work at Station 12 for 5 years, and I would know everybody's house that I went to, and would get to go to my kids' elementary school because it was right in the district to show off our fire engine. And so for me, it was very important that I was serving in the community that I lived. So when it came down to picking the two, that was definitely weighed heavy on my decision.
Yeah.
And it was risky, yeah, but it panned out, and I can't remember her name right now. It escapes me, but I must have called her like 6 times. And then Captain Williams, remember, not Jerry Wayne, but Jerry Lee Williams. Oh, yeah, constantly calling him, because he was at Station 10 when he was doing the hiring, and I would go by there, call him, just making sure you remember me.
I lost my contact information because we missed the first class, which is weird. Like I said, I was 17. Everybody in our class was under 20. And they pushed us in the second class. And since I moved from Colorado back to Virginia.
You moved before you got hired?
I got that number 17, and basically it was like,
in.
I'm going back to the East Coast, I'm going home, I'm going to get a job. There's no way they can miss me. And then they missed me for the first class. I got a job at TGI Fridays. So anyway.
He wasn't kidding about the chain restaurant.
No,
you as a waiter just seems like that would be an interesting experience.
It was. You get some management, some task-oriented stuff, prioritizing things. Anyway, but yeah, no, I called them like, what was it, the day before? This is hilarious, before we met. So 2 days before we met, it was like the Friday, I called city HR, and I was like, hey, or the fire department HR, and I was like, hey, this is Ray Neville, I'm supposed to be in a class. She's like, oh, we've been trying to get a hold of you, because we didn't have email or cell phones like that back then. And she's like, can you go to retreat on Monday for your physical? And I was like, yeah. And it's only like 4 blocks from where I live, so I walked down to retreat. So,
I got to tell you, it just dawned on me. there's been a struggle every step of your path.
Yeah, absolutely.
They lost his luggage when he came in for his chief's
Oh,
interview.
dude, that was hilarious.
He had to wear an ill-fitting suit.
Yeah,
So
I
borrowed
flew in
somebody's
at like
shoes.
10 o'clock at night on
Like-
the night before my interview, which is at like 7 a.m. And it was my cousins all lived here, and like I came.
You
They
mean
lost
for
my
the original
luggage.
job?
Yeah, for
Right.
the original
Oh, okay.
job. Yes.
Yeah, and so they like Voltron, we just come together. Everybody like threw in like stuff, and like I go in there, and Glenn Grooms was on the panel, and they're like, name a time that you had to overcome some adversity to get a job, and I was like. I sat up in the chair and I was like, funny you say that. And the suit coat came up to here. And I told him the whole story. I was like, these shoes are size 7. I wear a 13. Like, I literally took them off while we were interviewing because they hurt so bad. And I told him the whole story. And he, to this day, was like, oh my God. I remember the day you walked in and you had that tiny suit on. That was so funny. It was so funny. So I stood out in the interview. And he talked about that to the day he
Making
retired.
a difference, yeah. But then they lost your information. You barely made it to
Yeah.
the physicals for your
Yeah.
hiring process. Like you, like
It's all about
all-
perseverance.
that
You
is,
gotta
yeah.
keep going.
You
Because you might meet your wife.
right. You never
which-
know. That's
yeah.
right. You never
So
know
what?
what
So
could
what was that
happen.
like? Like, all right, so you guys are both on these paths towards this
I just-
same point.
yes,
So,
yes.
like, what was your
Colliding.
initial impression of Ray? Day one,
Do
you
I
meet
go-
him in the
Do
academy.
I go first? No.
Ladies first, right?
No, it was
That's
better
right.
than that.
No.
So this
we-
is weird. It's good that you asked me about my background.
Okay, so it's so crazy. So my dad is a huge skier. So we've skied, or he skied all over the world. But he's taken us to Colorado a handful of times when we were growing up. And then we went one last time. It was me and him, two of my nephews and my brother-in-law, and we went to Keystone. And we skied Keystone, and it was probably early January. I was there. It might have been like right at Christmas break or whatever. Anyway, long story short, I go into my physical at retreat on whatever fortuitous day it was that Monday in a Keystone sweatshirt. And some guy walks by me and goes, "Hey, Keystone, I just moved back from there, and I just went skiing there." And he was like, "I probably told you to slow down." And I was like, "Yeah, you probably did." And he was like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "Oh, I have a physical." And he was like, "Oh, for the fire department?" And I went, "Yep." And he said, "All right, me too. Good talking to you." And we both were like, because we were like, we can't date.
You can't
We
date somebody you
You
know,
can't hit on
like-
me anymore.
Here I am hitting on her, and because we're in the waiting room at the hospital, nobody knows who anyone is. So I just
Right.
saw the sweater. I was like, "Hey, what's up, girl?"
And then we were both like, "All right, good talking to
Never mind,
you."
see you later.
Turn around. But then actually we got into the
But that
class.
changed,
That
obviously.
changed. Obviously it changed. So we got into the class, and we actually ended up living 4 blocks from each other. He was on Stafford and Stafford and Stewart,
Davis.
or Stafford and Davis and Stewart, and I was on Hanover and Strawberry.
Mm-hmm.
So within like the first
You're right.
week, and so the training academy is 30 minutes.
Right.
So we were like, in the first week, we figured all of that out, and we were like, we should carpool. Like, I'll drive one week, you drive the next week, and so we just became, and all thoughts of any like there wasn't like that at all. It was just literally
Well, no, because
No, what?
I
Yeah.
was new
You-
to town. I didn't have any friends, and she was a bartender in the Fan. So
Yeah.
I was like, "What are you doing on Friday night? Can I come hang out?" And like, she
Yeah,
was like,
and he had a girlfriend, kind
Yeah.
of, sort of, in Northern Virginia, and I had a boyfriend. So we just became really, really good friends.
Yeah.
Like my best friend would go, like if I was, working. This is after we got out of the academy. She would go hang out with it. Like we just got intertwined, and then ended up single at the same time, and that was all she wrote.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we didn't date in the academy. We
No.
didn't actually start dating until we met in the academy, obviously, but we didn't start dating until probably a couple months post graduation.
And we didn't tell anybody because it's the firehouse. It's a rumor mill. and
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We actually weren't sure if we were gonna date forever or not, so you don't want to tell
Right.
anybody that.
Right. Because there was a lot of, we got very serious, and so that kind of like delves into the logistics. We had to start thinking about the logistics of it. I was like, how will we ever have kids?
Yeah.
Like, how would that work? And we are very lucky to be surrounded by family, but we still were like,
You can
How
want
would it
somebody
work?
raising your children. Like,
Right.
it's a 24-hour shift. You can't. We want to see each other, like we talked about prior to the interview. But 10 days a month we're at work. Is that going to be together, apart? And then are we going to be
Well,
20 days apart?
And there's, like I said, there's other couples that we have in the fire department, and it does seem to be a difference in opinion on that. It also
Yeah.
depends on what kind of support
It
you have.
absolutely
You know,
does.
because
Right.
some couples I know would rather take that hit for the one day so that they can be together as a whole family unit for
Right.
the other 20.
Right.
But they have to have that strong support
Right.
to
Somebody
and
wants
someone
to-
they trust to leave their
Right.
children with for 24
for
hours.
24 hours. And
So what was
Yeah.
that conversation like? And
Oh.
because you have 2 kids now, right?
You weren't even married.
Well, I
knew
mean, well, let's
nothing.
talk about
Right.
fast forward though. Let's
Right.
fast forward to all right. It's going to become a reality now.
Right. What
You
are
know
we
you're
gonna do?
you're pregnant. What is that conversation like? How did you work that out and make it work?
So typically in our relationship, I stress and overanalyze, and he tells me to calm down and
Wing it.
and we'll wears a suit too small to an interview like that. That's
Just
he's
get it
like,
done.
it's going to be fine.
And that's
We're gonna make it
surprising to
work.
me because he's normally, to me, the more emotional, I would say, hot head. You know,
Right.
so it seems that
Yeah.
counterintuitive that he would be the calm one
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
relationship.
No, he's for like when it comes to those big decisions, he's usually the one that's more like, no, we can do it. He is like ever optimistic. He is like, it'll be fine. We're gonna make it work. It's gonna be fine. But we did have to make the decision, like, are we going, like, so that's the first big decision. That's the first one is, do we have somebody you trust for 24 hours, or do you go on separate shifts?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, there's other couples, and actually a firefighter who's married to a detective. There was ever other decisions that they had to make. Which I mean, she actually gave up her job on the police force because there's also that, like, I don't know if you want to call it like I don't know what you'd call it, the conundrum of, okay, you're both working in a job where either of you could not come home. So do we want to be on the same shift? Do we both want to have such a critical?
You could be on the same
Yeah.
incident.
And you'd be on the
Possibly.
same incident, possibly on the same incident. So you weigh all of those things. Like, you just think of all the what ifs. And then for us, while we love our family and they have raised our kids a lot of their lives, we didn't want to put that on somebody for 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't want, because no matter who it is, and I have three sisters. He's got a sister. We both have parents that are still alive. So they're amazing, and they did a great job raising us, and they're doing a great job raising their kids, you know, our sisters and our siblings. But there's still decisions that our kids are going to need made immediately that we wanted one of us to be a part of all of those days and those decisions. And so for us, the ultimate decision was to go on opposite shifts.
Stay-at-home dad.
And he was a stay-at-home dad, and I was a stay-at-home mom 2 days, or what?
10 days.
So 10 days a month, or, you know, and then 10 days a month we're all together.
Mm-hmm.
Now my kids, we call it's either going to be,
Mommy, daddy day.
right, they don't know
Or
days of the
mom
week.
day,
Like, for the
dad
longest
day,
time, it was
no.
mommy day. Is it a mommy day or a daddy day, or is it a mommy daddy day? It's going to be a really interesting social experiment to see what they're like. They're either going to be super flexible adults that can adapt to anything, or they're just going to be kind of like very fluid, fly by the seat of their pants, like, you know, completely unstructured.
But they're older now, right?
They
so
are.
so does that make it a little easier, or is that harder? You think? Like logistically and emotionally. There's like two separate parts of it, right?
Logistically, it's easier.
Way
It's
easier.
way easier. Like, we literally, when they were babies, and you've got, like, and I actually love this part of their childhood. I love this part.
Yeah.
I have pictures of Riley Riley is our 13-year-old, Nolan's our son, and he's 10, almost 11. So when we had Riley, I worked at Station 6, and and he was at Rescue 1, and Captain Vito was the captain. And so there are pictures of Captain Vito holding my daughter, because I would bring her to work with me first thing in the morning, and then
there's
he'd
a
come.
picture of her with a pot on backwards like a ball cap. She's sitting in a
roasting pan.
But we got drinking, like, you know, back then. They were like taking pictures.
It was like
We
Mark
got your
Chase and
kids.
Pete Marziel and like all these firefighters, and they
Like
would
the
literally
gnome thing, huh?
they would scoop her for me as soon as I walked in the door. And Captain Vito was just very accommodating, and I can't remember who the other lieutenant. I think it was for a while. It was Kurt, and they would hang out until Raymond got there to pick up Riley. So I'd usually try and get there, you know.
I was rushing around. That was the most stressful part. Is like, I got to get relieved, and then I got to relieve somebody else, and it's got a cyclical
and then I get to get the
effect.
kids,
And then there's incidents happening, right? You know, you don't
Right,
get
if
off
you
on
catch a
time,
call,
or somebody's
yes.
late to work to relieve you,
Right.
or
Yep.
all those different factors, or maybe you're not
Yes.
working at your normal station for the
Yeah.
day, or whatever.
No, it was
you know?
all of that. It was a lot. And so when they were little, it was much harder. And we actually got to the point where we would start taking them over to his parents' house because they
Yeah,
lived in
in the
Fulton,
mornings.
and drop them off, wake them up at 6 o'clock in the morning, give them both the kids. When it was 2, it was a little harder. With Riley, it was easier to take her to the station. But now, at that point, we would take them to Ray's house. Ray would go, Ray's parents' house. He'd go pick them up, and I'd go on to work, and so we would just leave them there. Because once we made officer, it was just a little more pressure to make sure you were there and able to relieve on time. And
Because
you were
Because you're
going to
setting an
be...
example,
Yeah,
you know.
exactly.
So you have to-
Exactly. And you're going to be in charge of an incident, not just a firefighter who can swap out with somebody who's gotten to the station in their POV. Like it's just, once we made lieutenant, it became a little game changer. And we had 2 kids, so it was just a little bit of a game changer for that. And then finally they got old enough within like the last 2 years where now they know, when we wake them up and say, all right, mommy's leaving, daddy will be home in about an hour. And they're like, okay, and they roll over in bed. And we're still neurotic firefighters. So
there's been one of those incidents. I remember it was like 2 years ago, maybe. I had to call my sister-in-law who lives a couple blocks away, and she had to walk over in the morning because I wasn't going to make it. I went to an incident.
to
she
get
had
him
to
home.
work, and
But we won't
she
leave.
came.
Like, it's so funny, like, because we're still so neurotic, though. That was what I was going to say. We won't leave anything powered in the house.
No,
Like,
dishwasher,
just in case, like,
coffee
you
pot,
don't,
all
like,
that
nothing,
gotta go.
everything gets turned off. Like, nothing, we check all the smoke detectors monthly, like, because we're like, even though she's a teenager now, we're still just like, I don't want you to have an experience, right?
Yeah.
But we are lucky. So we have my sister who lives 4 blocks away, and then Ray's mom lives still in Fulton Heights, so she can get to him.
Mantra.
So,
What,
yeah,
what about
Montrose
like
Heights.
so what about the other side, the emotional side? I know like with my kids, and I've got a range,
Right.
but I'm kind of going through it now with my younger children. In that, before when I was at the firehouse, it was like whatever, like wow, we'll see you
Right.
later. But now
Right.
it's been more of that change of like, when are you coming home?
Right. Why do you
I
leave so
miss,
much?
yeah.
Yes.
And so like when
Yes.
I got put on a conventional schedule recently, so they were excited that I would be
Yes.
home every night.
Yes.
And I know y'all have had some periods of that too, where you've been able to be there more. So what's it like now though with y'all both on shift work? Well, you're
I'm
temporarily on 40,
I will tell you that Nolan had the hardest, my son, because he had me home when we had Nolan, I was on a 40-hour work week for the first year and a half of his life. And when I went back in 2012 to a firehouse, he was about 2 years old at the time, 1.5 2 years old, and he really struggled with the concept, and he had a really hard time that I wasn't home every night, and that I wasn't kissing him goodnight, and that I wasn't there every morning when he woke up. So he had a really hard time with it when they were little. He did adapt. I think for me as a mother, and Chief Spivey said this once, and it didn't make sense to me at the time, but now that my daughter is a teenager, it does. For my daughter, I'm actually having a harder time now not being home because she's going through these like middle-aged, first-time relationships, first-time periods, like
Change,
all,
just a lot of changes.
and they're all really emotional changes. And while Raymond is an amazing parent and has been with them so much, it's still like he doesn't understand some of those concepts. That you see, right? It's a mother-daughter thing, and so for me, emotionally, it's been a little bit harder the last year than it was when they were little, if that makes sense. Like just from that, like. Chief, you want to be there when your daughter's heartbroken and crying because somebody was mean to her, and that doesn't it's very easy to you can give them a toy or chocolate or ice cream or something when they're little kids and they've been hurt by somebody.
Yeah.
But 12 and 13-year-olds, they're like, no, I need a hug from my mom, and you're like, so there's that. You have to reconcile that, and she adapts, and we get through it, and she calls me. FaceTime is awesome.
Yeah, that's certainly a good development. But that is,
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the hard things about the job. We all
It is.
experience that.
Yes.
We miss,
Yes.
you miss
Yes.
ball games,
Birthdays,
performances,
everything.
and just the day to day, just
Right.
that's some of those simple things of
Right.
getting
Getting
them off the
some
bus,
practice, yeah.
Right.
practice, things like that. And but I can see where it would be, difficult, I mean, there's some solace in knowing the other one's there, but
Right.
in my family, it's like I'm the only one that misses.
Yeah.
But for you guys both miss out. But
Yeah.
Right.
it also might make it, you both might appreciate it more, or to be able to
Absolutely.
I
do
think
things
we do.
to make it easier on the
I think we
others.
do.
I think we do too. And I think, our kids have gotten and that's what we talk about, like that social experiment. They've gotten used to, my birthday is on this day, but I know that the family celebration is this day.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways they really like it because they get a longer birthday, you know, like they
Yeah,
get celebrated
Christmas
with the
could
single
be on
parent
Tuesday
on, you know, when one
after
of us is
Christmas.
home. So there is some adaptation, and hopefully, and they understand, and I mean, we also try and instill in them when they do say, you know, like we wish this or we wish that. That right. That we just try and
When's
remind them,
Mom
like,
coming
I
home?
know we can't be here for
When's
this
next Mom
event.
event?
I know, but we do try and instill in them that
Yeah.
we're out helping people, and that's very important.
And
to
how
us.
do you think they?
So-
do you think they understand service? Do you think they have an appreciation for the fact that
Now
both
they
of their
do.
Now they do. When they're
Now they do.
younger,
Not when they're
it's-
little, like all little kids. They didn't understand. They thought it was really cool that we were firefighters, and they loved the fire engine and the fire truck. But they definitely now understand, and like they'll like kind of say under their breath, "Well, no, I know it's, you know, I know why. I know why you can't be here. I know it's for a good cause."
You know, that's one of the
So-
things, you know, we talked about was like in our recruitment meeting was like talking about, you know, you have to have a heart for service. And I think most people want to help people. It's not that they don't care about people or
Right.
want to be good people and help others. But there's a certain level of sacrifice that that's part of the
Yes.
service is
Yes.
that
That's it.
You
missing
give up
those
this.
things and
Right.
giving up time with your family so that you can be there for those other families that
Yep.
need your help at that time. So,
Yep.
but it's a hard thing. I would
Yes.
think, you know, kids don't maybe not understand that, like you said, early
Right.
on.
Yeah.
But-
Well, and how did, like, just to throw the table back on you, so I have found, like, was it, well, I guess because your kids had already been around. I was just thinking, for some people, like, coming into the fire service that already have children, how hard is it for them to adapt? Like, my kids don't know any different. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, they think everybody's a firefighter.
Yeah.
Right, or they think everybody has weird schedules and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder how hard it is for a family. I've wondered how hard it would be. Like, our kids don't know any different. How hard is it for a family? Like, looking at what Nolan went through for families to adjust to the schedule. So that's just something for people coming into the service if you already have kids.
Well, and you know, it's different for everyone. I mean, I did have, you know, children, but they were small. So for the
they
most
didn't-
part, they did. But you know, I had the other dynamic of a divorce, and
Yes.
then they're living with their mom this normal 40-hour schedule, but
Right.
then with their dad, it's, you
All
know,
over
I
the
mean, it
place.
was all built around my schedule so that I could have the most time with them. But it's
Right.
still, they're seeing these two different
Right.
lives
Right.
where you guys are all on the same page. So I think
Yeah.
for my
Right.
kids, my older daughters, it was definitely an adjustment. And,
Yeah.
and honestly, you know, I've had an opportunity later to have more time with them, and they stay with me more, and it's been great. And
Right.
And it does make me appreciate the younger ones and valuing that time with them, and
Right.
the keeping our family unit together makes a
Yes.
big difference.
It does.
So it has helped.
I wonder too, like, and I don't want to scare you because I know you just got put on a 40-hour work week. But I will also say to, and I will tell people coming into the fire service that I found after having done 3 years on a 40-hour work week, and I worked a pretty traditional work week, that I actually found, for me, it is so hard to miss some of those events, but long term, you have more time on a shift work. Like, I have more quality time with my kids than I did on a 40-hour work week, because the 40-hour work week was get them up, get them fed, get them to daycare or get them into school, come home, get them fed, get them in the bath, get them into bed.
Reverse order, yeah.
And so it was, right, exactly. So there wasn't the quality time where now, you know, when you're on a 40-hour, when you're on the shift work, I could go to their lunches, and I would just literally go to their elementary school and be there from noon until 1, because they had lunch back to back, and I would just get to have lunch with them once a week, and I would get to go read in their
Volunteer at the
class.
school.
Right, volunteer at the
Yeah.
school.
And then summer,
like,
you've got
all day,
all summer.
all
basically.
summer, right? And it just, so for
And
me,
you're exhausted some of
time-
those days.
right, you
Yeah,
are,
that's
you're falling
true.
asleep
Trying to stay
at the
awake.
park, but you're at the park with them. But so I think it is a hard transition, but I try and tell people, yeah, it's a hard transition to get used to your family used to the shift work, but ultimately in the end it pays out dividends, long term.
And I think, this is my second time, and I definitely, when I had that little taste, it came at a good time because it was only about a year and a half, but it
Right.
came at a great time because it was my daughter's senior year, one of them. So I was able to make all the stuff,
Right,
all the
right.
big
All the
events. I didn't have
events,
to
right,
miss.
the awards
you know.
and the
But there was that period of, like, and before that, I'd been on shift work for 14 years, so that was pretty much all they knew. But then,
Yeah.
especially with the little ones, it was like, now they had gotten adjusted to me being home, because
Oh,
they had a smaller window of reference.
Right.
And now, like you said, now I got to go back to shift work. And then it was
Right.
like, well, why are you leaving?
Right. Why aren't you going to be home?
Yeah, you're not going to be home every
Yes.
night now. So, yeah, it's, it's definitely an adjustment. But there's also, for me, the family life was great, but the health perspective,
Yeah.
it gave me a lot of perspective on the toll that the job takes on your health
Oh.
and your sleep.
Your sleep.
Right.
Right.
For me, being able to sleep 6 to 8 hours every night consistently in my own bed made a huge difference in my energy level.
Yeah.
And when I'm on shift work, I'm heavily caffeinated most of the time, to be able to get through. And like you
Right.
said, by
Right.
2:00, whether you're working or your day off, you're just
Yes.
ready to fall asleep.
There's a
It's
there's a
compounded.
need.
So,
the
yeah.
afternoon cup of Joe, right?
So,
Yeah.
but-
There's
so-
trade-offs.
So tell me, because there's another aspect of this that I think is interesting about your relationships, and that you're both officers. So tell me about well, first of all, we've been talking about all this family stuff, and a lot of research that I've done through some of my education and other things. I've kind of looked at, what are the obstacles to women in the fire service and public safety in general,
Right.
because a lot of the classes and education training that's required for advancement takes you away from your family even more. And so how have you been able to balance some of that, balance that family life and then still be successful? Or how has it impacted both of you? I mean, with both of you basically having equal responsibilities. I know you were promoted, together basically both times. So you've had to learn new jobs and prepare for new advancements and everything at the same time.
Yep.
This is probably the first time in a long time that y'all have
It was
not
a
been on the
6-month
same.
6-month period.
Yeah.
I like to bring this up because she did better than me in all the classes. Even paramedic school. That I did
No.
go for captain for 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah, he did actually, and that was actually nice because, but like lieutenant we made together, and then he made captain first, which was actually kind of nice because then when I made captain, I could call him and be like,
Hey, what are you doing?
Hey, what it like station wise, because you go like the jump from lieutenant to captain doesn't seem like it would be that big, but just like going from firefighter to lieutenant, it's much bigger when you actually get the set of bars. Then you're like, oh, that was a much bigger leap. Oh, okay, I do have the whole station. Okay. So that was a benefit. But I think that for us, one thing that comes to mind immediately was that you just have to be really willing to meet the other person in the middle. And like figuratively and literally, I would be taking classes. I remember taking classes up in Northern Virginia when I became the EEO for the department and was doing the recruitment and hiring. And he would pack the kids up.
Really, I had a 3-day break. We were
drive to DC and would come and bring the kids to see me and try and make the 2 weeks that I was gone just a little less hard by meeting me in the middle. And we were very fortunate that we had family that would take him on shift days when he had to work.
That's where they come in handy is when
right.
when we
And
have
so
to
you
do
need a really good support system for it to work. And you need, like I said, you need the people in your life to understand your goals and to be willing to meet you halfway to help meet them. And like I said, so he was willing to just change his whole schedule and uproot everything so that I could still be a mom.
We both
a
did
little
because
bit.
it's the class I had to take to go for battalion chief it was an uprooting. It was like, I got to get this done. We got to do it. And
We'll just make it
she
work.
was like, okay, let's do this. And we're back and forth with each other whenever that comes up. And that's even harder of a challenge to, I know you guys sacrificed for me to be gone all these days, but can you give me a couple more days? And it's very challenging, but you got to be selfless in that because our goal is to be happy in this job and be a happy couple, and that's what it takes. And it's
Do you guys talk shop much?
Too much.
Too much.
But-
but that's a resource too, right?
It's
Like you
not
got
that-
a
I was
built-in
gonna say,
mentor or colleague
Right.
that you
No,
can.
it's actually for us proved beneficial. For us,
Because
and
you can bounce those ideas, like,
Yeah.
because I know, like you said, I got that hothead. Sometimes I want to come off and say something, and I'll be like, easy. You know, this other officer told you to just go ask Hallie or write it down and then talk about it and think about it. And it's so much better to call her and be like, hey, so this is what happened. Am I wrong? Am I right? What do I need to do? Like, and she has we have such different trajectories that,
And styles.
Yeah.
styles,
Yeah,
and
we
I
really
can
do.
I can bounce things off her. I was like, when you were doing the EEO and the hiring, did this happen? Like, did I miss something? Am I missing something here? And it's valuable to have somebody that's not a mimic of me or that sounding board,
Right,
that
so
echo
it's
chamber.
not in an echo chamber, right? Exactly.
It's good to have that difference of opinion because the trajectories that we've
Well,
taken.
usually, like, it starts with one of us will call the other, and it'll be like, all right, professional question. Like, and that's how we know that, like, that's what phone call it is. Or it'll be, all right, thing with the kid. Like, like, which mode to go into.
But do you ever have to go,
That's enough.
like, we're not talking
Yes.
fire department
Yeah.
today.
Yes.
We're just
Yes,
going to
we
be
do.
the Nevilles today.
Yes,
not,
we do.
Okay.
Yes, we do. And actually, our daughter is the best one at looking at us and go, I'm done now.
As
and
a
we'll be
13-year-old.
yeah, and we'll go, all right, you're right. And and it's the same thing. Like, when we tell them to put away the phones, they'll tell us to stop talking shop. Like, just eat dinner with us tonight. And we won't.
Yeah,
we
I mean, because
we
you
won't
also
talk.
have that extended family fire service dynamic
Right.
too, like so
Yes.
the
Yeah.
family barbecues. I think it would be really
Right.
easy to
Yeah, there was
Is-
dip into
Yes.
the fire service and
All
what's
of-
happening
yes,
as well.
all of
right?
it.
that one's
And-
easier because it's like if we're at work, we can talk about work, but when we're together, we don't have that much time together because we all have families. It's like let's just do the family thing. Now.
Right.
It's-
Mhm.
But I will say we do have to do one thing, which is actually really funny, and I tell we have talked about this with other couples that are like dealing with the same situation. To stay on opposite shifts, that means every 2 weeks we go 5 days without seeing each other,
Oh yeah.
and especially once we became officers, this got very complicated
Yeah.
in a way because you're at the firehouse and you're in charge, so you're very used to being in charge, and then you come home and he goes to work and you're in charge. You're the single parent for the day,
Mhm.
for that time, and so it's how you do things is how things go. And then 5 days later,
It's
we both
always
go
on a
home, and it's always
Tuesday.
on a Tuesday that we come home.
The mommy
And
shift
it's-
versus the daddy
Right,
shift,
versus
right?
the
Of how
dad
the
We
shift.
used to
household
call it the
gets run.
Tuesdays
Yes.
because
And
you're
so
both trying to be in
Tuesday is
charge
Tuesday.
of everything, and you're
Right.
amped up for some reason. Cause
And you're
just come off
exhausted
this-
because
yeah.
you've just come off of work, and so we found that we had to look at each other when one would get a little
'Cause you
snippy,
forget. You're just
or
trying to
you
go through
you just forget, and we'd look at each other and go, "It's a Tuesday," and you'd be like, "All right, I'll stand down. All right, okay."
Take it easy,
And
I'm
then
not in charge
I'm
right now.
right. I don't have to be in charge of the situation. We can just go to the grocery store. Okay,
And
You know,
it's
and
not
just-
until 4. Calm down.
right. So there are some you got to be willing to have those conversations with each other and listen and go, oh, I was okay. It's a Tuesday, and just have your
So now that you guys are not at the end of your careers, but you can see the
We're well
end,
into them.
right? You've got
Yeah.
you've got options soon. Like, how do
Right.
you guys talk about or manage, or what does your future look like as your last few years in the fire department and maybe after the fire department? What does that
Right.
look like, and how do you guys talk about that?
I
Have you
don't know.
decided?
Well,
Have you even
no.
had those conversations?
It's
Well,
always
we-
changing because
we
we-
always talk about retirement.
First of all, neither one of us saw each other in this uniform to begin with. Like, I never had the intention of like, no, I'm be the battalion chief in Richmond, and let alone a lieutenant or a captain. So it's, we were going to do our 25 years and be done with it. So now it's always changing. Like, I feel
Yeah.
like I've hit a new peak that I didn't expect to be at, and
And then there's the drop. Like, I can't do the drop the way that, I'm in the 20-year retirement, so the drop, doesn't play out for me. So I don't have that decision to make where, Ray and I have already talked about it, and he will, he'll probably end up doing some of the drop, if not all of it.
yeah.
Because he got in so early, in
Yeah.
age-wise in the fire service. So
And
for
she
me,
reminds me all the time that she can quit whenever she wants.
in 2 years, in 2 years, it's on. But no,
Yeah.
we want to stay. We know that we want to stay through the kids' like our kids are so little. We had them, later. So with a daughter only 13, even though I could leave in 2 years, I'm not going to leave when she's not even into college yet.
Right.
So right.
We're still just firefighters.
Unless we win the lottery.
But you could go do something else if you wanted to.
I could. I don't see myself.
It's the heartstrings for this job. That's why
right,
she's like, you might do the drop, and I'm like, we already talked about it. It's gonna be like 13 more years. Before You said I'm almost done. You're right. I'm on the other side, but it's a long hill.
It's still, with the drop involved.
That's 6 more years on top of the 25.
We do look forward to. I will say this. So we had kids. We had already been in the fire service. What, like 5 years when we?
Yeah.
No.
With Riley,
5 years. 5 years.
Yeah.
We've been in the fire service 5 years.
Same shift.
On the same shift. You talk about fun. We go on a 5-day break, and we would throw a dart on the East Coast and be like, where are we going to go this 5-day break? Because we had double income, no kids. I mean, you can't. It was great.
And then sync schedules.
Yeah.
And sync schedules and nothing to,
We weren't officers, so nobody called us on the weekend.
Right. I mean, you were literally just free and clear for 5 days. So we do hope in that remaining 8 to 13 years or 16 years or whatever we have left, that we'll be, like, once Raleigh gets into college and Nolan's a senior, we may look at trying to get back onto the same shift. So we'd like to spend a couple of years on the same shift together at the end, or a year or so, and then I'll definitely retire before he does, and then wherever Raleigh wants to go to school, I'll go live. Florida.
Hear that, Riley? Florida.
Yeah, Florida.
No,
she wants to be a marine biologist, so that's actually what we were talking about. But yeah.
It's hard because you said you can do other things, and there are a million jobs out there, and we know that, and we see it all the time. We've picked up part-time jobs throughout the years. Mm-hmm. It's all the negatives that we talked about, the being tired and the being away from your family. It's the nostalgia, and it's this department, and it's just our department. It's the fire service in general. It's an exciting job. We call it a brotherhood, but it's a family. It's the smell you were talking about, I only related to like a locker room. When you walked into a locker room and you're like, oh, this is like our little nest where we get to get together and be like, all right, now let's go out and beat the other team. And those smells are the same. And I'm proud of all the people that were able to walk away from this job and go do other things. But man, that would be a hard pill to swallow after.
I don't see we've just never seen ourselves doing anything else.
Becomes so much for so many people, and I think that's why a lot of people do struggle in retirement. It becomes so much a part of your identity and who you are, and you feel like if you lose that, then you start to wonder, who am I now? I'm not a firefighter anymore.
Especially in our neighborhood, like, because they're like, when something happens, they hear a siren, they're like, what's going on?
Yeah, we get text, phone calls, but it is, and there's just, I mean, there are times, I'm sure, and I think everybody's like, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go do like flowers because there's no pressure. No one's gonna die. No one's like. There are moments where we have said,
"That's what I don't want to supervise people."
Right, I don't want to supervise people anymore. Right, like those moments. But I think long term, I feel like when we walk away from this job, we would, and we have tried to, and I gotta tell this to my firefighters and recruits all the time. Please save money, save, because we would like to be able to walk away from this job and just go be with our families.
Have years in front of us too, because that's
that's
we
the
have
other
so many
trade-off.
people that are.
We don't want to retire. We don't want to stay here until we're 65, and then you just don't have the same retirement life as
you don't have all the information, so it's hard. You have to, like you said, it can change based on how your life changes and what we don't know what lies down the road for us. So I certainly am in the same boat, and day to day, it just depends. I mean, there's always that, even, like you said, not getting up the fire service necessarily, but even just trying another department. This is our department. This is what we know. I love the city. I love the area. I don't know that I could that another job I would have the same passion in another place that I have here. But there is part of you that wants to try. Because there might be some things you really like about another department. Or a whole nother type of service that's related, but not like emergency management or some other type of field that's related. So but I think it's awesome that you guys have been able to make it work. You've been successful. It sounds like in your family life, obviously in your professional life, but your family life as well. And I definitely.
It's not easy.
No.
There was a lot of growing pains, and the mommy daddy day thing that broke my heart. And the kids would be like, when is it mommy day again? The rolling eyes 6-year-old, and you're like, dude, tomorrow.
Yeah, I want her home too.
Yeah, I miss her too. But yeah,
I know.
there's 10 days together. Don't call us. We're busy.
Mhm.
Hanging
Yeah.
out. Like it's we.
Yeah, they do. Like they are going to have a hard time recognizing that not every Tuesday is a party. Because
Right.
we like when we're all
Yeah,
finally
it's
all
like,
four
oh,
of
we're
us
going out to
together
dinner.
on that
It's
Tuesday,
Tuesday.
right?
We've seen each other.
Yeah, but yeah, it is. But it's been worth every. I think every every hill and every valley
Every sacrifice.
has been absolutely worth everything that we have long term. I'm sure you feel the same way.
I do, and I appreciate you guys taking time to share your story with me, and
Absolutely.
with others. So I
Yes.
think that's a lot that people can learn from your experiences.
Good.
So thanks for taking the time to share that
Welcome.
with us.
Yeah,
All right.
thank you for having us.
No problem.
All right.
All right.